Roger Waters didn't start hating Jews 2 days ago on Piers Morgan's show. He didn't start revealing to the world that he hates Jews on Piers Morgan's show, but it was a reminder of his existence and not a reminder in the kind of nicer way with the music, although I think my co-host here disagrees on that. It's a reminder by actually us listening to him talk for an hour and 10 minutes. Much of it was about Israel and they who attack him when he says something publicly. And the parts that weren't about Israel also helped us see what kind of person he is. Um, in a sense, is he helping Israel while talking? That's what we're gonna try to figure out today. Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm joined by Jonathan Hoenig. Jonathan, you sent me before the show this short documentary that the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism did about Roger Waters. I watched some of it. It's no surprising that he's, a scumbag in real life. He's not just, a really nice anti-Semite. He's, a piece of shit through and through. Um, but yeah, I don't know if I didn't get to see the whole thing, so I'll get to the rest of it at some point. Did you get to see some or much of his interview on Piers Morgan's show?
I saw your coverage, Razi, and it's great to have all of our viewers from all over the world joining us. It's the 4th of July, but we're talking about individualism broadly today, and particularly anti-individualism. That really is, Roger Waters. What a unbelievable scumbag. And more than anything, Razi, what a nobody. Roger Waters is famous for, I guess, music that he made like 40 or 50 years ago now. My sense is nobody under the age of maybe even 35 even knows who he is beyond being a scumbag. And what's one example? I mean, his saxophonist tells a story of being on tour, I believe, in Lebanon, and being at a restaurant, having waiters bring him vegetarian dishes. Roger Waters getting unbelievably angry and demanding, "Take away this Jew food. What's with all this Jew food?" And as you said, I don't know if Roger Waters is a great, best PR person for Israel, but he's a great example of what real anti-Semitism looks like right out in the open, totally unabashed, totally unaware, on a global stage. And I do think he influences a lot of people, maybe not younger people, but he's a big influential voice. He's got a lot of money, and he's a repeat offender. I mean, he toured around and tours around, and we will have the image of it with a big pig, a blown up pig with a Jewish star on the side. This is what Roger Waters does, and as he pointed out, has done for years. And the war in the Middle East, the Palestinian war against Israel, is just the latest opportunity for him.
Yeah, and by the way, in case you're wondering what I'm doing later, after this show, we're in the reality show, we're going to talk about Candace Owens. So, my day is filled with anti-Semites, and I really forgot. But yes, happy Independence Day to our viewers in the U.S. and to our viewers outside the U.S. who should also be celebrating this. There's at least to some extent the ideas of the founding fathers are still in play even when they're countered by people like Roger Waters. And thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Thank you, Roland, for the super chat. Roland says, "Happy Fourth, you guys." Race says in the chat, "It's called kosher, Roger." Well, yes, but Jew food sounds better if you're saying it, especially in a place like Lebanon. It's he knows his audience. And to an extent, I wonder if he knows his audience with this as well, because he is not appealing to the masses. He is appealing, and he's not appealing to the best within people like we try to do. We're also not going to appeal to the masses, but we try to find the best. I think he tries to find the worst. He really, so when I say this is good PR for Israel, I think it's good PR when it comes to any semi-decent human being and above. But with many of the people who are already on the pro-Hamas side, this is something that people will look at and say, yeah, here's somebody who's finally, saying what we all think and saying it aloud without being ashamed and without being afraid and without being questioned about it that much by Piers Morgan.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I guess Piers Morgan did us a favor in bringing it to the forefront once again. But I'm having a little trouble bringing my screen up. I'm going to work on that in just a minute. But I mean, he what did he want to write on this big inflatable pig, Razi? I don't know if you saw this, but you know, apparently Waters fashions himself an anti-fascist. His interest was in putting on the side of this huge inflatable pig the phrase "dirty kike." That's what Roger Waters wanted to bring his audience, a big inflatable pig with the term dirty. I don't want to say it again, but you heard it. The unbelievably disgusting slurs on the side. And Ayn Rand talked about um, primacy of consciousness, right? When you're living and it's like you're not looking at the evidence, you're just almost telling yourself your own story and believing it. The fact that Roger Waters insisted to Piers Morgan that Israel made up stories that Hamas raped women and murdered babies on October 7th. He thinks that was all made up. He's not sure. Maybe it was a false flag. I mean, I would say it's the willing suspension of disbelief, but that's letting him off too easy. It really is primacy of consciousness. And, he's a sick man. And I'll throw it out there too, a shitty musician as well.
Well, we have somebody who agrees with you in the super chat. I'll get to that in a second. Yeah, there was that moment in the interview when Piers Morgan asks him about the baby who was kidnapped, and he says something like, "Are you making this up right now?" And of course, the reference was to Kfir Bibas, who, as we said yesterday, has spent more time now in captivity than he has since he was born before he was captive. But yeah, that might all be Zionist propaganda as far as Roger Waters is concerned, including the videos by Hamas when they take the hostages and when they murder people. Stedman says, wasn't Waters's concert in Poland canceled after October 7th? Yeah, I also vaguely remember something like that. Yeah, decent people don't want to associate with him. Thank you, Yotam, for the super chat. Yotam says a mediocre bassist. David Gilmour is the real PF, which I'm sure I should know what that stands for, and I don't.
Roger Waters' music sounds acceptable, I think, if you are on mushrooms. Then it starts to sound like music. And Razi, I think you played one of the clips or maybe commented on social. At one point in this interview, Waters seems like he might be on something. He starts kind of talking to himself. Don't say that, Roger. He kind of goes into this internal monologue that I'm saying is he's a nobody. He is a nobody. He's like an old man babbling on the side of the street. And it's only because he wrote some music 40 years ago that was popular with 60s and 70s era stoners that I think he has any platform at all.
Yeah, by the way, the thing with an internal monologue is the rest of us can't hear it, whereas in that case, we heard it. Yeah, to your Tom's point, so David Gilmour, one of the things that was in that documentary, and I think it was brought up yesterday as well, David Gilmour's wife tweeted about him being an anti-Semite, a misogynist, and a bunch of other things, and David Gilmour says something like she's absolutely right. And in that documentary that you sent me, there is a clip of him in a concert last year at the O2 responding to that, saying something like, "Can you imagine waking up next to her every morning?" Which is quite the answer when you're
Wake up next to this woman.
yeah, which is quite the answer when you're being accused of misogyny, but also quite the answer when you're being accused of a bunch of things that if you are not, maybe it's not worthy of a response, or it's worthy of a response, saying here's why this is not true. But I guess Roger Waters didn't see that, see it that way, and his audience seemed to cheer it, so they didn't see it that way either. Thank you, Wes Stewart, for the super chat.
Well, let me just jump in. Akira Felix, who is a YouTube member, and we bring you 7 days a week of original content inspired by Ayn Rand with some of the smartest people in objectivism, like James Valiant, so many others. Akira hits us up with, I believe, £5 a month. Not a lot of money, but he is helping keep this programming on the air. We are your advocates. We are educating people about objectivism. We're keeping the conversation going, applying Ayn Rand's ideas. And people like Akira, very smart, who mentions that if you listen to Waters' remake of The Dark Side of the Moon, you will agree with Jonathan. However, Yaron would disagree with Jonathan on saying that Roger Waters is a bad musician. Yaron grew up perhaps with that, but I mean,
Well,
when you look at Razi, imagine having a concert and this is what you want. This is the imagery you want to bring to your show. I mean, Roger Waters revels in dressing up. Now, I don't think it's an actual swastika. It's like a little swastika lookalike, but I mean, this is the imagery. It's almost unspeakable. It's disgusting. And what
yeah,
more needs to be said?
yeah, and to an extent, I understand if somebody hears a song like if we only listened to objectivist musicians and only watched objectivist television, yeah, we'd be very limited in the art that we can enjoy. But at a certain point, you make it a part of your brand to the point that if you actually pay for a ticket to a Roger Waters concert and go, you're voting with your feet, and you're voting basically for his ideas and not just his music. There were a couple of other things in the chat that I wanted to mention. Oh, yeah, Yotam says that PF is Pink Floyd. And he also mentions the documentary is The Dark Side of Roger Waters, which is available on YouTube. Do you want to play one of the clips just for people who didn't watch us yesterday on the reality show? Daniel, I don't know if we have that ready, so but if we do, we can play maybe the clip of where Piers Morgan shows something that Roger Waters did on his own social media without Piers Morgan interrupting him or censoring him or anything, something that he just filmed.
Yeah,
Uh,
let's see the crazy old man and laugh at him.
he's disappeared from our screen, but
way, is it?
No, no, it's from your own YouTube channel.
Okay.
It's called Resist the Genocide, and you said this.
When this is all over, Israel is going to have to apologize, not just to the Palestinians, but to the whole of the rest of the world. So we're very sorry. We got it all completely wrong, and we are now leaving. Okay, we'll go back to Eastern Europe or the United States or wherever we came from, and leave these people, the Palestinian people, people whose land this is, to, if they can, rebuild and live in peace.
Well, hang on, you didn't play the rest of it.
yeah, we don't need to play the rest of it. We know the rest of it is, yeah, maybe we'll let the Jews stay if they're happy to be slaughtered by the Palestinians rather than go back to the gas chambers. Again, it's interesting that he says Eastern Europe and he doesn't say Morocco, he doesn't say Yemen. I guess they were occupiers too. But it's also interesting that he doesn't say black people should go back to Africa or whatever other things racists and just bigots and scumbags typically say.
Yeah, I mean, read Miss Rand's essay, Racism. I believe it's in The Virtue of Selfishness. And, she likens racists to, looking at, I always think it's like that barnyard animal mentality. The black cows, this is my interpretation, black cows over here, the white cows over there. She looks at people as colors. And that's exactly what, Roger Waters is doing and doing it unabashedly. And as you said, oh, well, wait, you didn't see what more is there to see and to say? I mean, he has such a long history of this, Razi. And, he legitimizes all of those anti-Semitic tropes. As you said, the land was stolen. Israel stole the land. Go back to where you came from. The Palestinians want to live in peace. There's quite a bit on social these days of those peaceful Palestinians celebrating, high-fiving, spitting on bodies, spitting on hostages from just, 6-8 months ago. So Roger Waters is a really, I'd say he's dangerous, but I don't think he's powerful enough to be dangerous. I just think he's exemplative. He represents just that completely ignorant anti-Semitic perspective that hasn't changed. It's the same tropes as from 30 and 40 years back.
Yeah, and Vered says in the chat, he sounds exactly like a neo-Nazi. Actually, pulling back the curtain a little bit, yesterday, one of the title I wanted for the show, and there was a lot of discussion behind the scenes before we went with the title for the reality show, was Roger Waters as a Nazi. I think, the part of the problem is the word Nazi is being thrown around easily, but I don't think it's, I think it's easy in this sense to see the connection, the difference between him and actual people who would self-identify as neo-Nazis is they're maybe a bit broader in their hatred. They'll admit to hating different groups, whereas Roger Waters is very focused. He knows his enemy, which he declared his enemy, and
The story that's told in this documentary, which one of our super chatters pointed out is available on YouTube after this program, go check it out, is why this is an image from Roger Waters' show. So apparently he puts this big Anne Frank image up there, and he compares Anne Frank's murder in the Holocaust with an accident, which, as I understand, an IDF soldier shot a Palestinian, probably thought it was a threat. I don't know the whole, but an accident with the murder of Anne Frank and her family. And Roger, that's why this imagery is present in his shows. Here's the memory from that same producer that he called his agent an effing Jew. So it's all there and so widespread and so long lasting, but very exemplative of what's out there and what's fueling the anti-Semitism on campuses and everywhere else.
Yeah, and again, very much more consistent than what many in the more mainstream part of the pro-Palestinian movement would like us to believe the movement is about, because they would like us to believe it's not about hating Jews. It's not about wanting them wiped off the map. It might not even be about wanting them kicked out of the area. It's about oppressed people and so on and so forth. And no, ultimately, what's oppressing the Palestinian people is that their national goal of exterminating the Jews is not as easy to accomplish because the Jews won't go as sheep to the slaughter.
Here, 2013, Roger Waters was claiming that Israel has the same policies of the Nazis. In 2013, 11 years ago, he was equating Israel, which, as we've been talking about for months now, I mean, Israel as compared to Gaza, where's the rights respecting, individualistic, prosperous, to compare Israel to the Nazis is so just, ignorant. Google, Siri, what's bigger than ignorant? It's just so ignorant, Razi, that, and people come out and see him. They pay money to see him. For what?
Yeah, and again, it's not an accident to specifically claim when the Jews attempt to prevent the second Holocaust to compare them to those who who are responsible for the first Holocaust. It's very intentional. They know what they're doing. Thank you, Akira, for the super chat. Akira says or asks, Roger Waters is the Jesse Lee Peterson of music. That's because we were talking about Jesse Lee Peterson a couple days ago, and I would say absolutely not, because Jesse Lee Peterson, as I've said, I don't have any proof of this other than watching him. I believe very strongly that he is a parody. I don't think maybe he believes some of what he says, but I think the whole thing is an act. I don't think the whole thing is an act, or any of it is an act with Roger Waters. You would try harder and at least be a bit more entertaining, as Jesse Lee Peterson sometimes is in the level of stupidity he wants us to believe he has achieved.
Christian Klein, really generous super chat, and thank you again for all of your support. Razi works his tail off. So many of us here, Daniel behind the scenes, to keep you this programming, all these programs. And if you become a member, you get all this behind the scenes stuff. You get access to our panel on WhatsApp, and you get James Valiant's private group. So there's a lot to take advantage of. But Christian says people like Roger Waters are good reminders not to take recreational drugs like LSD. And again, Razi, if you even listen to that little missive, listen to his comments as against Dr. Peikoff in that famous debate from 1984. Clear-headed, concise, on point, logical, as opposed to Roger Waters talking to himself, seemingly, in his own little world there. He's not a spokesman for anything, certainly not history, and certainly not the Middle East.
Matt in the chat says, don't blame the drugs. I've done them all, and I'm not racist. I was thinking the same thing, at least the first part of that. I haven't done them all. But yeah, I was thinking that this is, people have done drugs and not ended up, maybe they've ended up talking to themselves about Piers Morgan, but they haven't ended up expressing this, endless stream of anti-Semitic vile comments in defense of Putin.
I think sometimes people like Jesse Lee Peterson kind of they want attention. So they go for that because that's how they know that they can get attention, to be more extreme and more, and it's almost a character. But I do think that Waters, because he's been so consistent on this for so long, I do think he actually believes this. I mean, this is like a week ago, he claimed that Israel has made up the stories that Hamas raped women and murdered babies. We've seen the footage, we've seen the evidence, we've seen the forensic evidence. But he's been so consistent on this that I don't think it's an act. He's not doing it for attention. Why does he need the attention? I mean, he could just go out and do tribute shows to himself, have a very nice living, like, I don't know, David Cassidy or Neil Diamond, any of these guys that go out and do, revival hits, and they have nice lives. But he makes these ugly politics and, insane politics first and foremost in his whole message. He even said, you remember, Razi, you saw that from the O2 Arena. He's like, anyone who doesn't like my politics and just wants me to play the hits, go and F off to the bar. So he wants his anti-Semitism to be front row center.
Yeah. By the way, one of the things he said early in the interview before he got to talking about the Jews is Piers Morgan was asking how much money you have, and he said something like, "Are you worth 300 million?" And he was very defensive about not discussing that. It's always interesting with these, caviar communists, although I don't know if he identifies as a communist. He really, really wants socialism for everybody who isn't him. And he's uncomfortable with that. Actually, the only part he was really comfortable with anything was when he was allowed to go on his anti-Israel, anti-Jewish rants. And you mentioned his struggle when Piers Morgan brought up things that the Palestinians actually did, and he didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to condemn it, was all over the place. He, saying Israel is committing genocide, he went right in there. That was not a difficult thing for him to say. Condemning what Hamas did, answering if Hamas committed war crimes, if they killed innocent civilians. He goes on this whole, well, I'm sure maybe some Hamas people on October 7th maybe killed innocent people, and that's wrong. That's as good as it gets with Roger Waters.
Ari has getting a lot of thumbs up in the super chat. Ari has a super chat. Thank you, Ari. Says, the only thing I need to know about Pink Floyd is we don't need no education. And I challenge you to name me any other Pink Floyd song. It just sounds like noise. And as I said, Mushrooms maybe makes it palatable, but they had one hit 40 years ago, and now he's a bumbling, senile, old 80-year-old man. I mean, this is really what he is, but with power and with clout, and as you said, with a boatload of money. Ironically, Razi, on the other side of that pig, I've seen on some of the shows, there's a big Shell oil symbol. So, as you said, I'm certainly anti-capitalist, like against big corporations. Meanwhile, he's worth as much as a corporation, and doesn't seem to be in a hurry to remedy that situation.
Well, maybe he wants to tax the rich, but he defines rich as anybody with 301 million and above. Yeah, by the way, we're probably going to get a copyright strike from Pink Floyd for you singing their song. Totally worth it. Better than Roger Waters. Should we play a bit more, just to refresh our memory of his...
Broadcast on social media.
Calm down. Roger. Calm down. Don't sink to his level. All right, I won't.
What level?
Well, stop shouting. Stop shouting back. Let him interrupt you as much as you want. Okay. All right. Sorry, Piers. What were you saying?
I mean, Roger Waters saying don't sink to his level to anybody. I mean, especially to himself about anybody. And with Piers Morgan is at a pretty low level. That's not a high bar, but Roger Waters does not clear it or come near it.
He's described in the documentary from people who knew him for years as being a real bully. And he seems like that. He seems like a real bully. He kind of can't, is that his little kind of trick? I don't know, it's so juvenile, it's so childish. And if you listen to his passionate speeches about his cause here, it sounds like a college kid out, on Columbia or Northwestern's campus, ranting and raving. And then when you ask them from what river to what sea, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So, just an ignorant, old, bumbling man that really represents a lot of pop culture now and a lot of culture writ large. And I think that's what's so disturbing and so disingenuous.
Yeah, and I always wonder to what extent he represents that culture, and to what extent he is being put front and center, because like we haven't seen much of him outside of his own social media until Piers Morgan thought, I need to keep the ratings up with the occasional anti-Semite.
Let me just ask, I mean, let's just kind of declare our terms here for a minute. He proudly states that he's an anti-fascist. He's against fascism. And what happens if you're walking around, let's just say, outwardly flamboyant as a man in Israel? What happens when you're walking down Tel Aviv outwardly flamboyant? My sense is probably nothing happens to you. You walk down the street. What happens the same situation if you're outwardly flamboyant or gay in Palestine, in any of those areas? You're met with force. And that to me is fascism. So his claims of being this, he is for fascism. He's for totalitarianism. He's against the moral agent, the only moral agent, the only moral country in the entire region. That's what's so bizarre. It's like if you'd ask him, he'd say he's for peace. He's for, I don't know, people's rights, but he's not. He's on the side of those who committed all of the murders, all of the rapes, all of the attacks.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest danger for gay people in Israel is that they can be killed by a Palestinian rocket or a Palestinian terrorist, as is the danger for everybody in Israel. And of course, in the Palestinian territories, they get killed because they are gay. Thank you, Ginger, for the super chat. Thank you, Christian, for the super chat. Christian says, his water's not whispering, my precious. He talks with his other ego golem. Look, that was the best part of that was the best part of the interview, in a sense. Although, again, like the question needs to be asked: is he actually doing? Is he showing? Shedding more light on what those advocates of the so-called Palestinian cause are actually motivated by?
Yeah, I mean, just someone who, if he wasn't worth what he is, and he wasn't in the band that he was in 40 years ago, you'd say, who is this kind of crazy, kooky old man? And I just, there's like a cult of celebrity that makes us think that Roseanne Barr and Roger Waters and, all these old hags are somebody worth listening to. And, they're not. I mean, they're just, but they've got that influence. And I'm happy to see Razi, as you alluded to, his label has dropped him. People don't want to associate them, and why would they? And I think to that extent, Piers Morgan did us a favor of reminding us just who we're dealing with.
Yeah, but who might want to be associated with him? I don't know if they have a duet in his next album, but that is Candace Owens, who I think has some similar views. She will be the topic of today's episode of the reality show. We know she hates Jews. She now confirmed she hates science as well. So
I will be watching that because she's hilarious.
Yeah, I want to say she's next level, but with Roger Waters, I think they're on the same level. Jonathan, where can people find more from you?
Well, the new book, which was co-authored with Dr. Peikoff, is called Can You Really Love a Dog? And it has nothing to do with the Middle East. It has to do with our pets, which we value, which Ayn Rand valued, and Dr. Peikoff values as well. So it's available on Amazon. Can You Really Love a Dog?
And I'm Razi Ginzberg on X, and I am on the reality show which starts in a couple of minutes. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you on the reality show.